Okay, great. So this is part 2 of cultural competence when your language skills are not enough. So this will also be interactive. There are actually a few more videos during this session. We'll have lots of opportunity for discussion because I have some images. How do you react to these? Because we're going to be talking about implicit bias. And I'm actually going to share 2 of mine because for me, when I do this work, sharing who I am is to make everyone feel comfortable in the room, meaning no one's unique in feeling this way. As a living, breathing human being, we have multiple biases, most of which we're unaware of. So in the first session, what we talked about was current language access regulations, the unique role of the interpreter as a language professional, the difference between a trained interpreter and Google Translate. Yeah, that was interesting. And as I had said, I wanted to be professional, but like I said, Google Translate fails. Lots of humor, lots of funny things out there. And I should mention that this session is being recorded, and I will be uploading the slides to the conference system, so you'll be able to download them. You'll see that my videos are embedded in the presentations. When I upload presentations, I give you the actual link to go to, so you can then access that video yourself or download it if you would so choose. So I wanted to put that out there. So the intercultural aspects of communication, the need for culturally competent interpreters as a strategy for improving language access, and that's what we just finished. And now we're going to spend the next hour talking about how our implicit biases may interfere with communication. And we'll be talking about implicit bias not only in our profession, but we encounter this, every single one of us, in our everyday lives. So what is implicit bias? Well, I'll start with this little video, which is an example of, and then we'll discuss it as soon as it's done.
Regarde.
Yes. Thank you for that. So what she said was, what's great about the video, you don't need language to make the point. That's actually a French video. And because she said at the end, Mama, oh my God, Mommy, look, right? And also, it's for a committee that's trying to fight Islamophobia in France. So that could be here in the United States. Think of any place, right? And it's very powerful because you can see, oh my gosh, he has this big bag. And now look, the gendarme, the polizia, the militia are coming after him, right? And was anyone shocked when they ran by him and went for the other guy? Not what you expected, right? Yes. So that's what the power of implicit bias is. So let's talk about what it is. So it's a term that has been around for a little over 20 years. It was coined by some researchers who were at the University of Virginia, Harvard University, and the University of Washington, Anthony Greenwald and M.R. Banaji. And they use the terms hidden bias, unconscious bias, implicit bias. They all mean the same thing. Basically, it's where our social behavior isn't entirely under our control. As human beings, we work on autopilot often. That whole fight or flight reflex, right? The amygdala of the brain. Remember, we had to make quick decisions. Is this friend or foe? Is this thing going to eat me? And if you made the wrong decision, it ate you. Or not, right? And we still do this when we interact with other people. So what's interesting about this is pretty much showing what the brain is processing, right? So it's looking at the external characteristics I was talking about at the end of the first session. So, oh my gosh, I noticed that person has a disability. And noticing isn't the bad part. It's the assigning negative characteristics or properties to someone based upon something over which they have no control, such as whether they're able-bodied or not, or their race, or their culture, or their immigration status, or their language ability. Age here, poverty, language, gender. So one way we apply implicit bias is that as human beings, we categorize everything, whether it's colors of tile, a rectangular table versus an oval table versus a circular table, right? The types of chairs, hardback chairs. Oh, and by the way, people, right? And what happens is once someone's placed into a particular category, it's very difficult to pull that person out of that category and think differently. So an example would be, have you ever met someone and on first impulse, you didn't like that person, right? Right? Every single one of us, I'm sure. We could all, hand, foot, everyone, right? But then you got to know that person. But think of how long it took to move that person from the, yeah, I don't think we're going to get along well, to I consider this a trusted person or a confidant or a friend or a colleague, right? It takes a really long time. And we oftentimes make those judgments very, very quickly. So the characteristics of implicit bias are many. So one is they are robust and pervasive. So I will say implicit biases because, as I said, every single one of us has multiple biases of which we are unaware. There are implicit bias, so that's the stuff we are unaware of. But now when you become aware, it's explicit. Now you know about it. What are you going to do about it, right? And I'll give you some examples of that in a minute. Our implicit associations don't line up with our beliefs. So it could be, but I help in homeless shelters, and I give money to the poor, and I send money to those poor children and take your pick of places. But, you know, I grasp my purse really closely when a young person goes by, or I put my bag on a seat because I don't want certain people to sit next to me. You know, I lock my doors when I'm driving through certain neighborhoods. I look at a person who's overweight and obese and I judge that person's educational abilities or wherewithal, etc. Those are all examples of implicit bias. We do, though, tend to favor our own group. That's not surprising, because if you think back to civilizations, right? The people who were in your group, those people were safe. People who aren't in your group, they were not safe. So we still hold on to those very deeply. Our biases do predict behavior, and the thing is, I don't think we can ever completely eliminate them, frankly, because we're humans, but I think we can learn some strategies and tips to try to mitigate them. As I mentioned about us working on autopilot, what this is similar to is, you know how you take the same way to work every day? You know, maybe Monday through Friday, I go this route, right? And it happens to be a holiday that day. What do you find yourself doing as you're driving? Oh my gosh, I didn't mean to go that way. I'm off today. Why am I driving towards work, right? We all do it. Or have you ever driven somewhere or arrived somewhere and you said to yourself, I don't remember how I got here. But you arrived, right? Happens. That is that part of the brain, and that's how we operate. So let's talk about how does implicit bias work in everyday life and also in our professions. So you've all heard the comment, first impressions matter, right? So how do we size people up? What is it that we notice about people when you meet them, when you're people watching, attending a conference, whatever the case may be? What are characteristics about people you notice? Feel free to say them and I'll repeat them back. Posture? Yes. Attire. Yes. Gender, attitude. Vocabulary. Age. Physical appearance. Accent. Size. Skin color. Yes, remember we talked about the color blindness in the previous session? Well-meaning but misguided, right? Oh, I don't really see you because I don't see your color, right? Okay. What other things in addition to those? Excuse me? Grooming. Grooming? Yes. Does anyone notice things like, oh, the person wears glasses or has piercings or tattoos or different color hair or smell? Smell. Several people just said smell. Any other things you notice? Late? Timely? Oh. Whether the person's timely. Okay. I know. Okay. Yes, Christina. Yes. Yes, social mores. And one that you're saying they want to be looked at or not. So in the U.S., if someone looks you directly in the eye, that's great, right? Oh, this person is, a clean-cut, honest person, right? But then that person who's from another culture who doesn't really look at you, and in their culture they're showing respect, but you're thinking the person's shady or dishonest, yes, that person's going to be judged negatively, right? Exactly. Other things. Handshake. Oh, yes, that's another one. Handshake. Does that person give a nice, firm, I want to break your hand handshake, right? And it almost becomes a contest. Anyone ever notice that? I'm going to grip your hand harder, right? But if someone doesn't have a very firm handshake, don't we make judgments about that? Oh, okay, I think this is a weak person because this person doesn't have a firm handshake. But then, do we shake everyone's hands? We just in last session talked about greetings, right? Because there's that whole, oh wait, if I'm a person who is the opposite sex, should I shake the hand of someone in certain cultures, maybe an Orthodox Jewish person or a Muslim person or whatever the case may be? That gets back to that cookbook because it depends on that person's level of acculturation. So here's some humor for you. So during the month of Ramadan a few years ago, at the end of the month, I went to an iftar, the breaking the fast dinner at the end of the month. And, I had heard, and this is that cultural cookbook, do not shake hands, with any of the Muslim men because you're not supposed to do that, right? So imagine my surprise when one of the men from the mosque sat down next to me, put his arm around me, and I'm sitting here like, what? In the back, and I told you, I do this work professionally, and I'm still learning. In the back of my mind, I'm like, wait, he's not supposed to be, what am I supposed to be doing here? I thought I was told blah, blah, blah. That's exactly what was going through my mind. I didn't know how to react, so I was like, oh, he must be comfortable, so I shook his hand. It was fine, not a problem. But that's why sometimes those cultural cookbooks or checklists can get us in trouble. He was fine with it. And what happens is if you go to shake the person's hand and they decline, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. And usually people will be fine, and it's fine, and you move on. What other things do we notice? Age, okay. If they show up. Yes, if they actually show up, definitely. So with that, think of all the things we've just listed off. We get, 15, 20 of them? So how long do you actually have to make that first impression? We've just rattled off 15 to 20 things. Our brains are microprocessors, and all of a sudden, it spits out something about a person based upon seconds, right? Yep. How many seconds, time-wise, you think? 10, 5? The latest study I had said 7, and it might be even less than that. So we just threw out, think of those 15, 20, and that wasn't even an all-inclusive list, right? Our brains are processing all of that and making a value judgment about the person in front of us. It could be a hiring decision. No, I don't think the person's a right fit. Person hasn't opened his or her mouth, right? It happens, unfortunately. So we're going to play a little game here. So the next couple slides are going to be either names or people or images, and I want to see what your reactions are to them. Like, what would your first impression be? And then I'll tell you how the person either identifies or some backstory about the person. So I'll start with this person. What would you think about that person upon meeting? Cute, young, likable, friendly, College student, outgoing, efficient, healthy. Great teeth, yes. I knew that one was going to come up. Yes, yes, great teeth. And, you know, for those of us who are working in healthcare, we know dental insurance is very expensive, and many people cannot afford it. And so, yes, definitely. So with the great teeth, oftentimes people say, well, she must be affluent, because if she can afford dental insurance, or her parents perhaps, maybe they have some money. Okay, what else? Happy. Okay. Slender? Slender, yes. Body type is slender? Yes. Single. Okay. She could be. I don't. Okay. So she's she. Wait. She's happy. She's happy because she's single. Okay. That's the first time I've heard that one, and that one was funny. Okay. So, university student. Yes. So now think, I was talking to a number of people during the break, and we were talking about the check boxes we all have to, you know, fill out on applications, forms, do they fit, are they relevant, whatever the case may be. We all have to check those boxes at some point, right? So if she had to check a race, ethnicity, and a gender box, how do you think she would identify racially, ethnically, and gender-wise? So, of Indian abstraction, okay. Of Indian abstraction. Indian, Dominican, okay. What was the? Caribbean, yes, Caribbean, yes. African American, Brazilian, all others. So check all that apply. Everything, okay. So we're pretty good. Any other? Yes. Ethiopian, okay. This is great. How about gender-wise? Female. Okay. Now keep that in mind. If you saw the name first, because do you ever get a client list, right? We all do this. You know, you get an email and you've got this vision of this person, and then you meet them in person, right? Or on the phone. We do that too. I didn't even put that in this session, but we do, what's it called? Linguistic profiling, that's the term, where you hear someone on the phone, and I think you had mentioned accents. Who had mentioned accent, right? So every single person has an accent, but we tend to focus on, I'll say, perceived foreign accents, or what we think are less cultured accents. Think of like Cockney if you're in Britain or something like that, or Southern accents, but every person has an accent, right? We just don't focus on all of them. So, you know, you get a list, right? Oh, my next client for whom I need to interpret is this person, right? Unless you've seen them before, but if it's a new person, right? So what if we keep everything in mind that you said, what if instead of seeing her picture, what came across your screen or your, okay, I'm dating myself. I was about to say pager. Oh my gosh. Okay, what was texted to you or the email was this name, Monica Soni. Would any of what we just put out there change? Yes. How so? No? No. Well, I'm sorry? It narrows it. Okay, what do you think now? Indian. I hear Indian? Yes. Hispanic. She's what? American born because of the first name, Monica? Okay, yes. Caribbean? Caribbean? Okay, yes. Burmese. Okay. From Sri Lanka? This is great. This is fantastic. Okay. Now let's get a map, and then we all have to put pins into every place we've selected, right? So, okay. No, this was great. Now, would anything change about her gender? So it sounds like, no, still female. Okay. So this is a real person. It's Monica Soni. If she had to check the boxes, she would check the Black and Asian box. But then if she had a place to put ethnicity, she would put Jamaican and Asian Indian. And then, yes, she identifies with the pronouns she and her and identifies as female. So, background, Jamaican, Asian Indian. Or Black and Asian according to those categories. But what was that? White Asian? White Asian? Oh, white Asian? Because Asian Indian falls under the Asian category when you look at the race categories. Because when you look at those categories that you check off for the boxes, if you go somewhere and they actually spell it, well, Yes, where was the woman I was talking to? We were talking about the different categories, where, it says white, for example, includes people of Middle East descent. And people are like, what? No. So that's what the category says. Or if it's Hispanic or Latino, it says origins in Latin, South, Central America, or any of the indigenous peoples. And I think American Indian / Alaska Native means any indigenous people, not only in North America, but also in Central, South, and Latin America. Yeah, it does. It's like most people don't look at the categories. But yeah, so that's why she would check Asian, because technically, and what I was about to say was, if you think of that broad swath of geography that encompasses Asia, or any of the categories, even black people, okay? Black / African American, black from Washington, D.C., black from Haiti, black from Ghana, Nigeria, black from Panama, they all get lumped in the same category, but we're talking about a broad swath of, so that's where it can get difficult. And that's why it was interesting hearing your responses. So does that make sense? Yes? Why do we have to do that? Well, the other work I do is health disparities, health inequalities, health equity. So I'll say from an equity perspective, because in the U.S., I can only speak about the U.S. context. I can't speak about anyone else's context. But in the U.S. context, we have broad inequalities based upon different racial and ethnic groups and socioeconomic statuses, et cetera. So that's why we capture that data. Whether it's looking at residential segregation and how that adversely impacts school systems and funding and the tax base, et cetera, that's why we collect that data. Or from health disparities perspective, why do certain groups die prematurely or age prematurely or have higher incidences of X, Y? That's why. Does that make sense? At least in the US context. Because I know in some countries, they do not collect that data. Or in some countries like Brazil, I've seen the list in Brazil, it's like hundreds of terms. So from a data collection perspective, that would be really difficult. So does that make sense? All right, so our next one, okay, it's a name first. So it's, hi, my name is Dr. Jean O'Brien or Dr. Jean O'Brien. So this is the person who's going to require interpretation services. Or it could be a new coworker, or it's an application that comes across your desk, or a resume. What are you thinking about this person? Irish, male or female, because it could be Jean or Jean. Educated, yes. What was that? French, Irish, Haitian. I saw a hand up in the back. What was it? Affluent? Catholic? Oh, Catholic. I'm sorry. Yes, Catholic. Sorry, I didn't hear that. Yes. The person's a medical doctor. Okay. Yes, don't we assume that when you see doctor, everyone jumps to medical doctor. It could be a pharmacist. It could be the, PhD in British literature or something, right? People just think medical doctor, right? Male, because of the doctor. So, no, not male? Not anymore, okay. So, not quite off topic, and I didn't put this slide in, but there's an interesting study about who gets called doctor. So if you're in the medical field, if you're a woman who's a doctor, you're less likely to be called Dr. So-and-so, but if you're a man who's a doctor, people trip over themselves to call you doctor. So like, for example, say if this were a conference panel and we had a woman doctor and 2 male doctors, the moderator might introduce the 2 male doctors, oh yes, Dr. So-and-so, and Barbara. All the time. And I don't know how many people have witnessed this in meetings. I've seen it personally myself. And I'm sitting here seething. She earned her credentials too. And even when I'm on a first name basis with someone and I'm replying to an email, I don't want to call the man Dr. So-and-so if I'm not calling the woman Dr. So-and-so, because guess what? They're both doctors. But don't we kind of jump to that conclusion? Doctor, man? Okay. So I've heard Irish, I've heard French, I've heard Haitian. So racially, ethnically, and some people have said woman, some people have said man. Okay, so here's the picture. So does any of that change? Irish or not Irish? Looks Hispanic? Irish? Still Irish? Irish blood? Irish descent? Married to that last name. See how last name can lead you astray? Right? Married to someone who's of Irish descent? Okay. This is an actual person. Yes. Filipina? Okay. So this is actually a person. This is Dr. Jean O'Brien, who is a professor of history at the University of Minnesota, and she is actually American Indian White Earth Ojibwa, which is one of the indigenous peoples of Minnesota. No, her real last name is O'Brien. Yes, that's why we oftentimes use last name to figure. It leads us astray. It could be a woman taking the last name. Some men take their wives' last names. Some same-sex couples, they hyphenate or take one. So you can't, it gets us in trouble. It goes back to one earlier. Remember I said the Rodriguez, right? I said Rodriguez could be someone who doesn't speak a lick of Spanish, and now you're like, hi, I'm your interpreter. What? I speak English. Why are you here? Right? Rodriguez could be someone who's Hispanic or Latino, although I'll talk about that in a minute. It could be someone who's Filipino. It could be someone who's Portuguese, depending on how it's spelled. We don't know. But we do make assumptions based upon last name. So, and, okay, how about this? Who is this? Oh, okay, before I show the picture, this group of people would be in a single group that one of the checkbox groups that you have on the forms. So, what do you think this group of people is? Hispanic. Who said Hispanic? Ding, 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 she's correct. They're all people who are Hispanic from Southern Florida. However, and I didn't put the video in because of time constraints, but there's a great video that I will include on your resource list, and it's humorous, actually. It's what's the difference between Hispanic, Latino, and Latinx, or Latinx? Because one is more language-based, so Hispanic is Spanish-speaking, versus Latino is geographic location, versus Latinx is basically a gender-neutral term for people who are Latino. We could throw in Chicano if you're out in California, although I don't know if that is, for those who are still in California, is that term still prevalent among people who are Mexican-American? I think it's an older term, frankly, an older term. Yes?
But they have now a new regulation with the framework with Chicano English. So that's a new whole different subject with Chicano.
There's a whole thing with Chicano.
With Chicano students.
Oh, interesting. Because there used to be things like the Chicano Student Association, or La Raza just changed its name, things like that. Who said they're the same people? Did someone say they're the same people? Yeah, they could be. Yeah, he is there. He's actually there 3 or 4 times. I think the point was, though, if you look at them, if someone eyeballs people, this is the conversation I had with someone over the break. Oh, you're black. Oh, but you can't be black and Hispanic, or you can't be Indian and Hispanic, or you can't be Asian and Hispanic, or but you can, because you have people of all those origins. You could be any race plus Hispanic or Latino. But we tend to use Hispanic and Latino interchangeably, although that's not correct, because, for example, with the use of, so Hispanic is Spanish-speaking, but Latino would include people from Brazil, but they don't speak Spanish, they speak Portuguese. So that's, yes?
Latino means coming from a country.
Coming from a country that's,
Came from Latin. So
right.
French, Italian, Romanian, Spanish, Portuguese.
But in the U.S., right. But you're correct. That's originally what it meant, but in the U.S. context, the way we use, you're right. So I should say and clarify, in the U.S. context, it means people coming from South, Central, and Latin America. But yes, in the broader context, it does mean anyone whose language is based upon Latin. Yes, like what we used to call the Romance languages, probably. Yes. So, but yes, U.S. context versus world context. Thank you for that. So does that make sense, though? Because someone would, yes, go ahead.
When I moved to live here, I learned that, check if you're Hispanic or Latino, and I'm like,
what does this mean?
Mexicana. I'm
Right.
I don't know if I'm
Right. Yes. So what's interesting is that right now on all these forms, it's 2 questions. The first question is, do you consider yourself Hispanic or Latino or of Spanish origin, I think is how it's worded. And then the second question is, check all the races that apply. So the census is coming up for 2020. So there have been all these different iterations of what should we do, and they haven't finalized it yet. But I sit on the CDC's Health Disparities Subcommittee, so on their behalf, we submitted a letter. And one of the proposals is to combine it into one question and just say, what is your background? So Hispanics in there, Latino, Black, whatever. And if you're any of those, all of them, check all that apply. Because sometimes the race versus ethnicity confuses people, because Hispanic Latino is certainly not the only ethnicity in the world. It's just in the US context, that's what we say, versus, but I'm Cape Verdean, I'm Irish, I'm Italian, I'm Russian, I'm Filipino, right? Those are all ethnicities too. So you can see it gets really dicey regarding our data collection. Oh, yes. Right.
And if you go back, they have Russian, from the white side.
Yes.
Russian from the east.
Right.
That would be Indian, Native American, Native plus
Mm-hmm.
Spanish. So it's like,
Yep.
what are they?
Right. So a couple of the examples have you check the current racial boxes, but with underneath you could write in what the different ethnicities are, so that if you were white, you could put Russian versus Irish versus French versus whatever. So I don't really know how it's going to shake out and what it's going to end up being. It is, and not only that, so I've done trainings for people who are the registration staff at hospitals, and we all tend to eyeball people, because I'm black, I have 2 black parents, but I've ended up white in my medical records repeatedly, and it's frustrating and annoying, because I have to tell the person at the desk, oh, I'm actually black. Oh, I would look at you and think you're mixed. Well, that's great, but that's not true, or not in the context of, yeah, further back, but not my parentage, my parents, right? My kids, my husband's white. I have biracial kids who are much lighter. They make me look dark, actually. And so when people see me with my kids, it's like, oh, are you the nanny? Yes, I got that when they were little. So it comes, when people are doing these forms, they might say, oh, you checked the wrong thing, because you look like you're, but it doesn't matter what they perceive you to be, it's how you identify. And I saw the hand up, go ahead. Who had the hand up? No? Yeah, same, yeah, exactly. So how about this? This is another group. Now, they are not a race or ethnicity that you would see on a form, but they're lumped together as a group as well. So if you saw this group of people together, Middle Eastern, Indian, Pakistani, Islamic, Muslim, Bangladesh. Now, okay, think of what we just said. Southeast Asian, Pakistan, Mid-Eastern, okay. Would it change if I added in this group of people? They're all part of the same group. They're all Muslim. All Muslim Americans. All of them are Muslim Americans. Even the women who are not wearing hijabs are all Muslim Americans. So that, think back to that video I showed at the very beginning, lumping people together and then making negative assumptions about them. Now, what's really interesting about this, I had to put this slide in, I've been using it for like the last 6 months. Well, one is, first of all, what is the country that has the largest Muslim population in the world? Yes, yay. Probably because I'm in a room full of interpreters. Yes, Indonesia, because typically when I ask that question, I get, oh, the Middle East. I go, well, that's not a country, but, but yes, okay. But here's the interesting thing. So this is the racial composition of the US Muslim population. It is not what anyone would think it would be. So it's actually, the largest group of Muslims are white Muslims, followed by black Muslims, followed by Asian, other mixed, and also there are some Hispanic Muslims. So yeah, when I've shown them, like, what? I was like, yeah, I thought it was very interesting to share, because think of from an implicit bias perspective, flying while Arab, flying while Muslim, driving while, like you can tell who's the Muslim person in the room. You can't always tell. You can't always, and that shouldn't be happening anyway. So this one, here's your next client. Hi, my name is Laith Ashley. So what do you think is Laith's background, racially, ethnically, and gender? I heard mixed. Vietnamese? Asian? Scottish? English? Irish? South African? What? WASP? Wait, was that, did it say white Anglo-Saxon Protestant? Did someone say that? Oh, okay. Yes, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Any other, oh, okay, and gender, male, female? Male, Laith, okay. So this is Laith. So, okay, that was interesting. Okay, that was the safe for professional presentations, picture of Laith. You can Google Laith Ashley at your leisure. I'm not putting any of those in my, and they're not bad pictures. I'm just not putting them in my presentation. I'll put it that way. But okay, so this is Laith Ashley. Laith is actually racially and ethnically is Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and is transgender. Transgender, female to male, or would be identified as trans man. So the terms are kind of changing. So again, you can't eyeball people and tell. So think from an implicit bias perspective. We had that whole debate about who should use what restroom based upon birth certificates. I really don't think anyone's going to stand at the men's room and question Laith, frankly. And ladies, I don't know if you'd want Laith in the restroom with us. Because no, what the bill said, what the law said, that was, what is it, House Bill 2, North Carolina? What it said was you would have to use the restroom based upon what's on your birth certificate. So on Laith's birth certificate, it would say female. That shows you that's ridiculous. Because everyone in there just wants to do their business and get out. And hopefully wash their hands on the way out. There you go, right? Go ahead. Yes?
Because I think for a male going into a female restroom is safe because we have bigger people. So who cares if it's a male?
Right. Probably, although been in ladies' restrooms lately, women, we are not good. And you got to wait in a long line. So advantage going to the men's room because it's shorter, but whatever. But no, this goes back to the assumptions about who people are, right? So how about this one? I'm sure you have all seen this one. What do you see first? Male or female? Old woman, young woman. How many people first glance saw the young woman first? Most people, okay. How many people saw the older woman first? How many people actually saw both at the same time? Right, some people see, okay. So here's the interesting thing. I am not a psychologist, but I can see this being one of those books. How many spots do you see? Is this what does this ink blot mean, right? But does this mean because most of us saw the younger woman first that we value youth over people who are wiser and older and more experienced? Think of how this works in the workplace or our society or interactions with people, right? Just something to think about. Here's one. I like humor, as you've probably figured out. And I'm sure many of you have seen this short video. This is an example of how implicit bias works in everyday life. And I'll talk a little bit more after I show it.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is how do democracies respond to those scandals?
Remember this
what
one?
What will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me. Pardon me. My apologies.
What's this going to mean for the region?
My apologies. South Korea's policy choices on North Korea have been severely limited in the last 6 months to a year.
How many people had seen that before? Okay, yeah, when it came out, I'm like, yeah, every working parent's nightmare who works from home, right? So, but do you remember, who did people think the woman was in the video? The babysitter, the nanny, right? That's that's his wife. Yes, this is Professor Robert Kelly and his wife, Chuna Ma, and their kids, James and Marion. And they're actually going to make a cartoon based upon the kids. It's kind of funny. But it's interesting because if you Google this, one other funny thing is, so if it were a woman who were presenting and the kids walked in and maybe either a woman came in, would people assume it was the babysitter? Could it have been her wife or partner? If it were a man, would the man be assumed to be the babysitter or stay-at-home dad? I mean, just think of how our brains just quickly jump to judgments, right? Right? Also, would the woman have been judged more harshly? Because, you know, people, I mean, believe me, everyone laughed. The thing went viral. They've had interviews, et cetera, et cetera. The poor mom, what she said was, yeah, you know, I was with the camera trying to record it on TV, and the kids were out of my sight in a second. Yes. Anyone who has young kids, no, they're out of your sight in a second, right? But, you know, she was really worried that BBC would never ask him back to do another interview because he is an expert on South Korea. So that's why he was doing this interview. But it was humorous because of the kids. So, but it shows you how people make all kinds of assumptions. And think of just the way, where I wanted to take this, though, was that now you meet with the clients, and we make assumptions. Oh, is that your wife? Or, you know, if the guy looks a little bit older, oh, is that your dad? Oh, that's your wife? Oh, right? Anyway, these are all implicit biases playing out. Or same-sex couple, and you don't assume that the person is the partner or the same-sex spouse. Or what's the relation of everybody in the, right? And that could really sour an encounter, right? Or maybe we've all experienced some of these at some point, right? So just thinking about those instances. So, okay, so don't think of this just in terms of hiring. Think of this in everyday. It does impact hiring, by the way. I'll talk about that in a second. But think of it in any encounter and how these aspects of someone can be held against them. So names. Last session, what we talked about was, you know, the primary part of your identity is your name. You're given it, right? And you know, basically, what the studies too found, the Chicago resume study, there were students who had a certain kind of name. It was Emily and Brennan versus Lakeisha and Jamal. Identical resumes sent out for jobs, and Emily and Brennan were far more likely to be called back than Lakeisha and Jamal. Now what's interesting is now the Canadian resume study, which came out earlier this year, it looked at Asian last names, and what it found is people who had Pakistani, Indian, and Chinese last names were less likely to be called back for interviews. So again, think of the bias that's at play just based upon your name. And you can't, for the most part, that's who you are. Why should my name have an impact on my ability to do a job or my candidacy or something? Company culture. How many of you have heard, oh, I don't think that person would be a good fit? But yet when you press people on that, they can't usually give you you know? Has anyone ever given you an answer for what good fit means? I feel like it's a code word for they're not one of us or something. It's just weird. That's definitely a form of implicit bias. Yes, go ahead.
Once I got told I looked too Hispanic.
See? That goes back to how people are perceived. Right. Great. Yep. So again, these are all examples of implicit bias. And think of it, whether it's your clients, working with your own fellow colleagues, even some of the examples people were talking about with judges, teachers, the medical profession, all this stuff comes into play. Think of the assumptions that are made about your clients because they need interpreters. They're less intelligent, right? They don't need the same decision-making authority. I'm just going to tell that person what to do, right? So it impacts not only our clients and the people we're working with, but us as professionals and just us in our everyday lives. So applicant, oh, I'm sorry, yes, go ahead.
About an agency that didn't send an interpreter to an assignment because the assignment was with a group of minors, and the interpreter that was available was a gay guy. And they didn't want to
Oh, my.
put him in the spot with the minors.
So what she said is it was an interpretation encounter that was with minors, but they didn't want to send the gay male interpreter because it was with a group of minors.
As if a heterosexual couldn't do something
Right.
wrong as well.
Exactly. So there's a fine line between the implicit and explicit. Where do you go from implicit to discrimination? Yes, go ahead.
Situation we had with an OBGYN, a young lady like in her early 20s who's sexually active was in for her annual, and the doctor is adamant that she really should be on birth control because it's good and so on and so forth. And it turns out later on she's gay.
Yes, exactly. So what she said is, young lady, early 20s, goes to the OBGYN. Doctor is very adamant about she's sexually active, by the way, that she should be on birth control, but she identifies as gay. Again, those assumptions that are made. Forms say the same thing. Birth certificates say, you know, mom and dad. You could have two moms, you could have two dads. Or school systems. I've talked to a number of people who are in school systems. You know, there's parent, guardian. You could be raised by your grandparents. It could be a non-custodial parent. It could be a relative. You know, so just again, thinking about how people feel like there's nothing here that fits me. What am I? How does that feel, right? There's also applicant pool composition. So when applicant pools have fewer than 25% of women, women are less likely to get hired because the perception is, oh, there aren't enough qualified women, so we can't possibly hire a woman, which is an interesting one. And also because that was a gender example, remember the doctor example I gave you. Or even if you're a woman and you go in the room and you're the doctor, but you're mistaken to be the nurse, but if you're a man who's a nurse, you're mistaken to be the doctor, right? things like that. Oh, social media biases. Okay, this is not about people posting inappropriate pictures, you know, doing shots, hitting the bong, doing things they shouldn't be doing on spring break. Not that at all. It's not that. What it is, all the stuff that you cannot ask people in job interviews, like do you have kids, what's your sexual orientation, do you have a disability, what's your religion, what's your political affiliation, think of all that kind of stuff. I could go on your LinkedIn page and look at your associations. Oh, this person I think is black because that person went to a historically black college. Or, oh, I think this person's gay because this person belongs to the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association. And people make those assumptions about you and hold it against you, unfortunately. Oh, this is a big one. Overweight and obese applicants and employees. So the studies have shown that, yes, overweight and obese applicants and employees are less likely to be hired, more likely to be fired, less likely to be promoted, make less money, less likely to be the face or the presenting portion of the organization. And they found in secret shopper studies that even if you're sitting in the waiting area and you are a non-overweight obese person and you sit next to the overweight and obese person, you're not likely to be called back either because they remember that you sat next to that person. So guilty by association, and it rubs off on you too, right? But what's interesting about this really only applies to women. So the men who are overweight and obese, it's not as much of a hindrance. What it reminds me of is think of newscasters, right? What happens to female newscasters after a certain age? Well, she doesn't appeal to our audience, and off she goes, right? Right. Oh, that too. Yes, that's been yeah. Yes, and they were making fun of her outfit. And in fact, a guy, newscaster, he did an experiment. He wore the same suit every day for a year. Anyone hear about that? And no one cared. No one made any comments. But they have female newscasters who are up there, and they, during the break, oh my gosh, we got to switch her into something else. It doesn't appeal to the, who cares? She's delivering the weather, the news. But that's, again, that gender aspect, unfortunately. Okay, those with criminal histories are returning citizens, someone with a felony or even a misdemeanor. So if you have a felony, there's a term, in this US context, felony disenfranchisement, where you can't, it's very difficult to get a job, low-income housing, food stamp benefits, educational benefits. You're pretty much a pariah of society. It's kind of like that scarlet letter, the scarlet A. So, and then when you can't function in society because you don't have any other opportunities now that you're out, and you end up back, oh, that's your fault. Big issue. Oh, homeless, one big cause of homelessness because you can't get the housing portion. Even something as simple as a misdemeanor can keep someone from getting a job. And you think the person probably needs that chance, that opportunity, but we're going to hold it against that person. The next one, poor credit histories. In the US context, what has been the number one reason for bankruptcy? Medical bills, right? So I'm going to hold it against you and not hire you because you had to declare bankruptcy because you had a catastrophic illness or you had to take care of a sick relative and you lost your house and it was foreclosed. Yeah, I am. People do. It's really sad and horrible. And what if you happen to know any of this about your client? You know, people are, oh, that person doesn't manage money well, or that, you know, it can skew people's perceptions. Oh, accents. We already talked extensively about accents. We tend to focus on foreign accent versus my Connecticut accent or whatever it is these days because I've lived a bunch of different places. Also Southern accents, because I remember doing a presentation about 8 years ago and there was a white female PhD trained nurse. She had credentials, so many credentials behind her name, but she had a heavy Southern accent. She told me afterwards she was thinking of getting accent reduction training because as soon as she opened her mouth, think of the judgments. Despite the credentials, they didn't need, you know, so it was really holding back her career. Or when we were talking, how people present themselves. If you don't speak proper grammar, or you don't speak the Queen's English, or if you don't, right, we judge you as being less intelligent. Those with disabilities, whether it's physical disabilities, mental health issues, etc. Again, not very difficult to get jobs, but also just in the workplace, in our educational systems, in society. And then again, if it's one of your clients. And then lastly, those who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning, or intersex. That's a mouthful. So basically, we have any protections that were in place are being rolled back. Nothing at the federal level. Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, I mentioned that last session about language access, that also did cover gender identity. It did not cover sexual orientation. Sexual orientation pretty much came more so under the sexual harassment pieces or gender aspects, but there really aren't many federal protections, and they're very much state-based. And actually that North Carolina thing, HB2, you know what that was about? Even though it was billed as the bathroom bill, it was the fact that Charlotte, North Carolina, passed a bill, a non-discrimination bill against people who were LGBTQI. That's what set that all off. So trying to provide equity set off what became known as the bathroom bill. So then what can we do about it? It's nice we talked about it, right? So I don't want everyone feeling beaten down like, oh my gosh, we have all these biases. There's something called compassion fatigue. When you hear just so much gloom and doom all the time, I can't do anything, right? So one is, don't beat yourself up about it, because I'm going to share two of mine real quick. One is, I used to be very politically active, and one election day I was out knocking on doors. Ma'am, sir, have you voted today? So a young black male, I asked him, oh, sir, have you voted today? No, I can't vote. What was my assumption about him? That he was a felon, right? But I like to talk, as you can probably tell. So I had to probe further. I go, oh, so why can't you vote? Well, I immigrated from Jamaica 8 years ago, and I'm not a U.S. citizen. Remember the work I do. And remember last session I said, even though I do this work, I'm human also, and I'm learning, and it's lifelong learning. I left that encounter, though, feeling like this, and kind of like, wow. And I'm a black woman, too, and I do this work. You know, I felt really crappy. Self-flagellation, felt awful, really bad. Okay, so that's one. Wasn't aware of that one. But then again, a lot of when we think about where our biases come from, it's media images. Like, I'm not even touching on that in this presentation. If you were in my longer version, it's media images, it's this, it's that, right? So we can see where that comes from. My other one was, I was on vacation in Cancun 2 years ago with my kids. We climbed one of the ruins, and this really nice older woman asked, hey, would you like me to take a picture of your family? How should I have responded? Should have said yes, right? Yeah, I should have. But I said, oh, thank you, but oh no, I was going to ask this man over here, this younger guy, you know, to take the picture, and he took it. He wasn't all that nice, actually, but he took the picture. And as I'm walking back down the ruins, and I'm sure most people would not be doing this, but I think it's because of the work I do, the self-reflection, I was like, oh, man, did I do that because she was older and I thought maybe she was technologically challenged and I'd have to tell her how? I probably did. And so I did not know that perhaps I haven't, there's that unconscious bias. But now it's not unconscious because now I'm aware of that. So what it means is in those situations, I kind of self-regulate and like, okay, now that you know X, take a deep breath, slow down, pause before you jump to a conclusion. I saw a hand up. Go ahead.
I wanted to share that. A couple years ago, I was talking to two coworkers who are African American, and we were talking about a certain family, and that was the black sheep of the family. And the person, one of the ladies, turned around and said, "Have you ever noticed that everything bad
Is black. Yes. Yeah.
And she says, you know, black heart, it was a black night, it was this and that.
Black cat.
And
Superstition.
superstition, and
Black cloud. Yeah.
I said, you know what, I haven't realized it. I'm very
There's one
sorry.
exception. When your account is in the black, it's good.
That is true. Yes, when your accounting is in the black, it's good. So what she was saying, I don't know if everyone could hear what she said, and I've been trying to repeat things back. I'm sorry about that one. Is that she was talking to a friend that was African American, and they were considered the black sheeps of the family, and the fact that, for the most part, except for the one example he gave, there probably are others, but I can't think of them right now, that anything negative is associated with the color black. So, you know, but if your account is in the black, that's true, you're not in the red, that's a good thing. But the black cloud, the black knight, the black horse, the black cat. Yes, go ahead.
Well, something that I would like to share is that I handle some meetings in English,
True.
and we had an African American woman coming into the meeting, and the majority of people speak Spanish. So I thought she was in the wrong room, but because I'm aware, I didn't say anything. I kept my mouth quiet. So when we had a break, I asked her in English, and I approached her, and she said, "Yes, this is the right meeting. I'm happy to be here. Perfect English, everything." So when we finished the meeting, she spoke to me in perfect Spanish.
Yep. Yes.
One of my best clients.
Yes.
And she loves me, I love her, but I was so happy that I was so aware of the environment, and I did not make an assumption
Assumption.
that because she was African American, maybe this was the wrong meeting.
Exactly. So I don't know. And again, it's because it's being recorded, I'm trying to repeat everything back, but I'll get to you after I get to him. But what she was saying is she was in a meeting where everyone else was Hispanic, Spanish speaking. A black woman came in. She assumed that she was in the wrong meeting, but she didn't say anything. That's great. Self-regulation, being aware of the context. Didn't say anything, waited till the end, spoke to her. She had perfect English. And then in her perfect Spanish, guess what? She was in the right meeting. So again, you were aware in that instance and probably didn't know, oh my gosh, this is my implicit bias at play or something. But yes, you self-regulated. The person in the back and then in the front. And there, oh my gosh, okay. So I have a quick question. We have 3 minutes left. When is the next session? Because I have about 10 minutes of material left. This is it? Are you able to, I know it's Friday, and I know the conference, can you stay for a couple minutes? Yeah. Okay, because I don't want to cut anyone off, because I think this is great. Okay, okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask permission. So yes, go ahead. Yeah.
I just wanted to find out that black can mean power too.
That what, I'm sorry?
Powerful.
Black can mean powerful? Okay, now okay, that's excellent. So black can be powerful. You mentioned Black Friday isn't bad. That one made me laugh. But right, okay. Yes, so you had a question, yes. And by the way, if you have to leave at 4:30, no worries, that's fine. If you need me to sign, come up and I'll sign while we're talking real quick if you have to leave, because I don't want anyone not to get their signature. But yes, go ahead.
I'm the Spanish interpreter in Arizona. Everybody who comes into the office, unless they have worked with me before, are looking around, where's the Spanish
Yes,
interpreter?
yes.
Attorneys and clients. The clients come in, habla español? Sí. Do you speak Spanish?
Yeah.
And of course, as
Yes.
I understand, I don't match the usual profile.
Yes.
But I get that every day. And it's,
It's exact.
it's just another day, and I don't take it personal. I think
Right.
a lot of it is we have to all remember everybody has their own reality.
Right.
We cannot take things personal.
Right.
We just can't.
So the example she gave is she's a Spanish language interpreter in Arizona, and yes, when the clients, everyone walks, where's the Spanish, what, do you really habla español? Right, so because of her appearance, of how she presents. So there was one, yes, go ahead, and then.
I want to share a moment of shame when I misgendered someone. In my heart, I knew that this person was presenting one way, and then when I turned to introduce the person to someone else, I used the wrong pronoun. And I thought, just do that. So to kind of take the weight off of my shoulders of having done that, I chose to, it's sort of what can we do in our profession. I then wrote to one of the agencies that I worked for and asked if I could help change the dress code. Because the dress code read, for men, wear suit, tie, belt, whatever. For women, wear blah, blah, blah. And I thought, why does it have to be that way? Why can't it just say, wear business casual or whatever?
Yes.
So I'm going to put that out there.
Right. That's an excellent example. So what she was saying is she misgendered someone, and she knew what the person's gender was. And believe me, I've made the same mistake, with the name. And one thing I didn't do is sometimes when I show Laith's picture, people are like, well, what was his name prior? It doesn't matter, because that's not who Laith is now. So I'm not going to go dig up just not appropriate. But yeah, so what she's doing though is in their dress code, it says men are supposed to wear suits and ties, and women are supposed to be dresses and whatever. What about women who wear suits? Or men who wear kilts, or a caftan, or something that's way more comfortable, by the way, right? So why does it have to be gendered like that? So you can see how this crosses over into our work, our profession, but in our everyday lives. So here's the important part. So how can we mitigate it? It's great to talk about it, but we can talk and talk, and it continues. Like I said, we'll never eliminate it, but we can try to address it. So one is, how many people have heard of the implicit association test? A few people, okay. So the researchers I mentioned at the beginning, Anthony Greenwald and M.R. Banaji, they and their colleagues developed this. It's been around for a little under 20 years. It'll be in the resource guide. If you even just Google IAT for implicit association test or Project Implicit, I'm going to show you the kinds of tests they have available. But basically, they're free. These are free, yes. What they do is it's really trying to show you where your conscious and unconscious minds are different, diverge, are separate, where they don't match up, right? And so basically, it's meant, though, I'll say, for self-education and self-awareness. I would never say, as part of the hiring process, everyone must do these IATs, and based upon how you place, no, And when I ask people to do it as a precursor to a workshop, I'm like, don't share your results. I don't need to know. I don't want to shame anyone. And by the way, no one should feel ashamed because either we were raised in the society or we came to the society and we have different exposures. It's really for you to be self-reflective and self-aware. So the kinds of IATs they have available right now, they started off with the race one, black, white. And what you had to do is you have to use 2 fingers, and it's interesting, you use 2 fingers, 2 letters. They start off with words, good, bad, click for good, click for bad. Then it's white faces, click the white face, click the black face. Then they switch it up. So there's the black face, and you have to associate a good word with the black face. And that's what trips people up oftentimes. Or it takes them longer. Like you can do it, but you have to think about it versus doop, 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 doop. So that can get difficult. Sexuality, so this is the gay, straight sexual orientation. Arab, Muslim. Gender and career, that one's interesting. Should women be career-oriented? And what's interesting about this, even women who themselves are career-oriented find that they come out on this test as, no, women shouldn't be that career-oriented because think again, what are the messages we hear in our society, right? Age, young, old, disability, so able-bodied versus disable-bodied. Asian, so Asian versus European American. They also have Native American versus white American. Presidents, weight, skin tone, weapons, so what's a weapon versus a harmless object? So think from a police perspective. You know, and what they found in this one, this is quite interesting, they've used this in a lot of law enforcement communities, is that officers are much more likely to misidentify a harmless object as a gun for people of color, especially black males. Hence, think of people getting shot when they really don't have anything. And gender and science, same as the gender and career. Even women scientists are less likely to come out as being in favor of that. They also have mental health ones. And again, if you're working with a client, if you're in behavioral health and you're trying to serve as an interpreter, that's challenging anyway. But then if you're sitting there, oh my gosh, this person has mental health issues, think of the biases we can bring there. So these are all the different ones that they have. So here are some practical tips. Remember I said that this is just how we're hardwired. So should we just throw our hands up and say, okay, I'm hardwired this way, I can't do anything? No, please, absolutely not. But as I said, the goal is to not feel guilty. Remember I told you my story and how awful I felt? I need to follow this. I still feel like a little bit guilty, although I'm working on it. But recognizing that we're all like this. Because if you feel guilty and shame, you're not going to be able to move past this. And trying to be an agent for change versus, oh my gosh, I'm paralyzed, I can't do anything by inaction or compassion fatigue. So some great debiasing techniques are trainings, not just the one and done and not the 2 and done either, by the way, but it's just that continuous lifelong learning. Intergroup contact, so interacting with people who are different from yourself. Whether it's most people like to eat food or share food, breaking bread, meals. Book groups, worship if you have a faith community, you're going to different places of worship or different communities, festivals, something, putting yourself in an uncomfortable position. What it means is if you're the only whatever, getting out of your comfort zone, but seeing what it might be from someone else's perspective. And the not just one thing is what happens is if you just have one whatever, my one gay friend, my one black friend, my one Jewish friend, my one insert X whoever here, right? You tend to exceptionalize that person. So you might really like that one person, but it hasn't changed your ideas about the whole group. And that's not what we want. And yes, your hand up, I'm sorry. I want to come back to you.
You were going to that direction
Okay.
because I am very familiar with Project Implicit. I do that in every training I run. We talk about
Excellent.
but when you have in the class someone that says, oh, I don't believe in that, and I don't
Yes.
have that bias because I
Yes.
took that test, and I
Yep.
am not, example, opposed
Yes.
to LBTG
Thank
because my son, my daughter
Yes.
are lesbian gay.
Yes.
And there is an entire class there. How would you suggest to manage that situation?
Yeah, so that one's hard because you get the naysayers like, oh, the methodology is flawed. Okay, those who work in medical, the healthcare field, right? You don't like the data, so you shoot down the data, right? But, oh, it's flawed. One is just say, look, you don't need to share what your results were. It's really nice that you have a son or daughter or a friend or whatever. But you know what? This is still a learning process for all of us. So just because, you can be interracially married and still be racist. You know, you could have kids who are gay and be a homophobe or transphobic or whatever the case may be, or, you yourself came from another country and you don't like immigrants. It's every single one of us. It doesn't sound rational, but it can happen. So it's that exceptionalism. So, yeah. Yes, one hand and then I'm almost done. Oh, yes. Yes. Those people, right? Yes. Right. No, absolutely. That's a great example. What she said is she had a friend going to Paris and suggested she go to the Museum of the Arab World, and the person's like, I don't want to learn about those people. But you know what? We as humans have something in common with those people. So maybe if she saw the common humanity, maybe that might change hearts and minds. So just quickly, because I don't want to hold you up, and like I said, this will be posted, taking the perspective of others, that's that empathy, looking for the common humanity in whoever you meet, whether it's your client, your coworker, your neighbor, your family member, whatever the case may be. Emotional expression. So nonverbal body language, that can give you away. You know, you might be, yeah, I tolerate or accept the person, but if I'm sitting there glaring at you, you're not going to believe me, right? And nor are you going to trust me. So, and then using counter-stereotypical exemplars. So like I gave the example of women in science or something. So for people who are like, oh, I don't think women should be scientists. You know girls are bad at math, blah, 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 right? Well, think of women scientists. You know, I think of Hidden Figures. I think of Sally Ride. I think of women astronauts. I think, you know, if people think about those kinds of things, then maybe they will come around. So just some tips for further reading. So there's the book. This is the layperson's book from the two researchers, Mahzarin Banaji and Anthony Greenwald, Blind Spot, Hidden Biases of Good People. Disclaimer though, it was brought to my attention the use of the term blind in this context. That is basically an ableist term because it's like black, right? The black, blah, 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 right? It's a negative, it's basically saying that someone who is blind is not the sum of their parts. It's bad because they're blind. So the book came out a few years ago. I've tried to not use the term like uncovering our blind spots or something like that and trying to choose something else. There's the Implicit Bias Review. They've been producing annual literature reviews about all the science. It's great. You don't have to do it yourself. It's been coming out since 2013. It's the Kirwan Institute of Race and Ethnicity at Ohio State University. You'll have a link to it. They're great. If you're in healthcare, Dr. Gus White, a retired orthopedic surgeon from Harvard, seeing patients, fantastic. And then Howard Ross, Everyday Bias. And then also, too, there are little quizzes you can take from Love Has No Labels. You might have seen some of the commercials. Has anyone seen the one with John Cena, the wrestler, walking down the street? That's from this public service announcement, Love Has No Labels. It's all people from different kind of backgrounds, and he says at the end, basically looking at the humanity of people. There's also this tips to fight bias and prejudice, and what's great about it, they actually have examples and tips on how to fight bias in all these different areas, whether it's your workplace, your job, your neighborhood, whatever. And then lastly, the Southern Poverty Speak Up Responding to Everyday Bigotry. I just wanted to end with this short video, and then I will sign. In fact, if you want, I can sign while the video's going, but it's this putting it all together. It's that common humanity, seeing what we have in our fellow human being. And it's, by the way, it's from Denmark. So if you want me to sign, I'll gladly sign while it's playing.
It's easy to put people in boxes.
Yes.
There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside,
Thank you.
and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
I'll just write it on the bottom.
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
All right, so thank you everyone for being engaged, participating. As I said, I'll be uploading the presentation, the resources. I have cards up here if you want them, and I'll stick around and talk to anyone, and I'll sign off on your sheets if you need it.